now. We're going to skip around on the agenda and start with Senate Bill 2725. And I'll recognize Senator McMahon to present that bill.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you for the members of the committee being here. What we've got here is a proposed committee substitute. And this is just some small changes to the current code. Basically, the changes begin on, if you look at line 46, currently, if you're a pawnbroker, if you hold a pawn license in the state of Mississippi, you have to hold products for 21 days. And for any of you that are hold gold or silver bullion, you know that the market can swing hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars in a matter of days. For those that were holding gold, it swung several $1,000s from Thursday till today. So, but anyway, what this proposed change would do would be allow the pawnbrokers to just in gold and only in precious metal, coins and bullion, instead of having to hold it for 21 days, they would only have to hold it for 3 days. And that's what the bill does. And really, pawnbrokers are at a disadvantage anyway. You can go into a jewelry store and sell gold and silver, and they can sell it the same day. But pawnbrokers have to hold it for 3 days. So that's a change those lines would change. Secondly, on lines 83 through 88, we've got a bill here that would change the fingerprinting requirements from 1 year to 3 years. Your fingerprints don't change, senators. Fingerprints are always the same. So it just changes the requirement from 1 year to 3 years. And then on line 100 and 101, there's a technical change, adding a PO box and the new zip code. And that's the proposed changes for the bill. I yield for any questions.
For clarification, current code has that fingerprints have to be annually, but the requirement by the FBI is every 3 years. So we are just matching that. Is that accurate?
That is my understanding. This conforms to that requirement with the FBI. That is my understanding.
All right. Any questions by committee members?
Explain this to me. When somebody goes into the pawn store, are they selling their gold or are they pawning it?
This is in the case of selling. This is not a pawn. This is selling gold or silver bullion.
Okay, so explain to me. So in code, is there a difference between just because they go into a pawn store, they have different rules on their ability to sell the gold?
That is correct. So, no, currently anything that's taken into a pawn shop is a 21-day hold if it's pawned. It's a 21-day hold.
If it's pawned, but what if they
or sold? But in the case of bullion, because we're seeing hundreds and actually thousands of dollars of swing changes, we're trying to allow this industry an opportunity to limit the damages that are taking place, not just to the industry, but also to the individual.
Okay, so, all right, do this bill. If somebody wants to pawn their gold, the 21 days would still apply? Or only 3 days?
Hold on, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask for clarification for that. The Mississippi Pawnbrokers is represented in the room, and I'd like them to speak to that with your permission.
Just 1 second. I want to make sure I'm following your question. If people pawn gold, can they sell it in 3 days? Is that what you're asking? Okay, and I'm confident the answer is no. You are recognized to address the committee.
Mr. Fulton, would you come to use the microphone and state your name and who you're representing for the record, please?
My name is Nick Fulton. I represent the Mississippi Pawnbrokers Association. I have 6 stores in central Mississippi, so I can answer your questions. A pawn loan is for 60 days. This doesn't have anything to do with a loan. It's strictly when a customer comes in and they want to sell their metal. It allows us an opportunity to turn it over faster, because as we've seen the last week, in 1 day, silver dropped 33%. So as a consumer, it's going to be more fair for them to be able to come in and get more for it, or in my shoes, I'm going to give them less because I've got to hold it, and it's very volatile right now. So there are some states that have to hold 0 days when a customer comes in to sell, 0 days.
Are you liable for, so this would only be if you send a picture of the gold and silver to law enforcement. Is that accurate?
We don't send any pictures. It's all digitally. Not every pawn shop does the same thing that we do, but we digitally upload within 24 hours of the product coming in our store straight to law enforcement.
And if it comes back that that was stolen, or who is responsible to the?
We are.
You would make them whole regardless of.
We always do. We're supposed to get, the criminal's supposed to pay us back, but that happens 1% of the time. So we're out of the money. We're very, very, cautious.
Any other questions? Any other questions by committee members? Any other discussion? All right, is there a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
Title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor? Committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, pass that bill out. Next up, we're going to go to the top to Senate Bill 2530, which is perpetual care cemeteries, and I recognize Senator Super to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's two parts to this bill. One is want to raise the limit of the Perpetual Cemetery Trust Fund from 50,000 to 75,000, which currently, if you have any funds over 50, you have to create a trust. Under 50, you do not. And the other part is the certificates of deposits are maturing every 30 days, and the cemeteries are unable to get any type of interest on a 30-day CD. So we want to at least give them the option to go at least a year or under a year. But give them kind of a range on the CD so they can actually get some interest on these CDs. And that's the extent of the bill.
Any questions by committee members? If not, is there a motion? Oh, yes. Yes, sir.
Well, they're part of the cemetery. They're perpetual care money that the cemeteries are maintaining, and so well, I mean, they're renewing every 30 days. I don't think they can cash them in. I think it's part of it's the funds for the cemetery. I guess they could, but they're regulated by the Secretary of State. So I'm assuming if they did cash them in, there would be some penalties for them doing that. But we're not changing any kind of law or anything like that. We're just changing. Well, my understanding is they have to do audits through the Secretary of State's office. Now, I don't know if anyone's here that can answer that, but they have to maintain a registry with Secretary of State, and I do know they go through some types of audits, and I don't know the frequency of that, but I can get that information for you. I don't know that anybody signs off on it at this point. Like I said, I don't know why it was only a 30-day CD, but these guys are just like, we've had 5% interest rate in CDs, and we're getting, 0.1%, I can't answer that question, but I can find out for you. But I do know that they have to go through regular. I don't know the time frame. I'm assuming every year or so. Contact Secretary of State's office. I know they do some types of audits. But
yes, sir.
Senator McConnell's pointing out they can only use the interest for care of the cemetery. The principal amount has to stay intact.
And this bill only changes the amount of principal, and it allows for them to get a longer-term CD. And that's the only two changes. It doesn't change anything under existing law about reporting to Secretary of State, and I think that's addressed here, but we can get more information just to make sure. Any other questions?
But there is language on, line 66 through 69, perpetual care cemetery electing to maintain certificate deposits shall file documentation, with the Office of Secretary of State with submission of an annual report. So I'm gonna say annually, they have to submit documentation.
Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
House sufficient, do pass. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll pass that bill out. Next up, we have Senate Bill 2712, and I recognize Senator Sparks to present this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2712 is an item I believe we passed last year. This deals with loans of the small loan regulatory law where you have collateral that is pledged. As most of us know, if you get a collateralized loan, it means you've pledged something of value. And generally, to perfect your rights and the collateral, you have to file a UCC. You have to run a title search, if you will, to make sure that that collateral is not already pledged. Another option that is available is what we see in this legislation is that a fee can be charged for insurance of non-filing of a UCC. It's a fee of $10 up to $10 max on loans of $100 or more. And that is simply to allow the small lenders to utilize that fee. And this is under some direction from the Department of Banking and Consumer Finance of how this needed to properly be executed. In some cases, it's more expensive to perfect your collateral UCC filing than it would be to charge $10 and buy the insurance. So that's a brief explanation of the bill. I would yield to any questions.
Questions by committee members? If not, is there a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
House sufficient, do pass. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll pass that bill out. Next up is Senate Bill 2714. For that, recognize Gordon Fellows or Eric Bennett with Mississippi Bankers Association.
Yes, sir. The 2714 is essentially, it's a combined effort between the Treasurer's Office and the Bankers Association. We're working on addressing several statutes in the Mississippi's Unclaimed Property Act that need some modernization, some updating, and specifically from our own, in our interest perspective, it also intends to create an escheatment process for the contents of unclaimed safe deposit boxes. And the issue here is that unlike essentially every other state in the Southeast that we're aware of, Mississippi has not had any kind of legal escheatment process for tangible property, including that contents from those unclaimed safe deposit boxes. That has in turn created this limbo where financial institutions are essentially forced to then store that abandoned property indefinitely, including in the case of several institutions for literally decades, with no clear recourse to do anything with it really, if you're not able to find an error or have someone come to you with proof that they have the legal right to it. And at the same time, it also makes it far more difficult and far more unlikely that property actually ends up being reunited with the rightful owners, or in many cases at this point, the rightful heirs to that property. And so the idea here is that working with the Treasurer's Office, we would create this escheatment process that would be part of the Unclaimed Property Act and would be treated similar to how we already treat intangible property, by creating a process where the bank would be able to first, if after the contents have become abandoned or presumed abandoned, which the time period we're using here is, I believe, 3 years, which is in keeping with the kind of the average around most, especially our surrounding states. The bank would then be able to drill into that box. And first of all, before they would be able to do that, they would have to have a notary present. They'd have to have two bank two bank officers, including a notary, present for that drilling, and then they would have to inventory it, notarize the inventory, and then submit the report with those contents to the treasurer's office, as well as submit send multiple notices to any addresses they have on file, again, as well as if they have any email addresses or anything like that, they would submit that as well. And to take every possible attempt to try to notify whoever may have interest in that. And after a certain time period goes, and especially depending on the treasurer's ability to take the amount of contents, the bank would ultimately escheat those contents to the state, and then the state treasurer would then, similar to how several other states, including Florida, handle it, the treasurer would have the authority to auction off those contents, but only after taking additional steps beyond the multiple notices that have already gone out on the bank's end. The treasurer would also have to send out notices again to any possible addresses that may be on file, as well as to pursue any other reasonable measures to try to find the rightful owner. Or like I said, in a lot of cases, a lot of times with these boxes, you're talking about heirs, and then would also publish notice and then ultimately get up to the point of a public sale. And if it goes through to all the way to that process without finding any heirs or finding anyone that makes any claims, the treasurer would then auction off those contents and put the proceeds from that sale of the contents into unclaimed property under the name of whoever's box that was, so that it would still be able to be claimed by those individuals, or said their heirs. And part of the main focus there is, outside of the banking side of it, is the recognition that the treasurer's office has a much greater capability, as we've seen with Treasurer McRae specifically, in being able to go out there and actually be able to find a lot of these heirs and find a lot of these folks who have unclaimed property, and be able to actually reunite them with that property. As well, we also have specific provisions in there dealing with, for example, giving the treasurer authority to promulgate rules to address potential firearms or anything else that may be in the boxes. So in various contents like that, but essentially that's the main overview, is to create that process that allows banks to actually be able to do something. And it just as a very brief overview of the scale of the issue we're talking about here, we did over the last year or so, we met with the treasurer and most of our banks several of our banks across the state, ranging from the smallest to the largest. And we had for some of our smallest banks, they may have only had a few dozen of these unclaimed boxes. We had one small bank on the coast that had about 1,000 of the unclaimed boxes, and that goes up to one of our larger banks here in Jackson reported that they have about 5,000 unclaimed boxes that have been sitting there going back to the 70s.
Right,
And yeah.
just following up on that, I think that the big point of this, I would assume for most committee members, is the due process to make sure that every attempt is made to reach either the owner or the heir of the person who secured the box. And I just want to make sure I understand, in a short, quick bullet point, the process of the bank and the process of the treasurer's office to do that.
Absolutely. So essentially, we mirrored language that's in Tennessee statute regarding a very specific statutory notice that has to be sent out to make sure that there's no confusion about contents.
Where does that get sent?
So that would be sent to the last known address that's on file for the holder of the box, especially in this case, you're talking about usually a couple decades even old, but whatever those, if we have multiple addresses maybe, then we generally send it to all of those, as in most of those that wouldn't have had email addresses, but if we happen to have any information about email addresses, we'll send it to.
Okay. And is that just one notice, or is that multiple?
There's a minimum of two. They have to.
By the bank?
Right. There's a notice that when the rent becomes delinquent, that, hey, if you don't pay your rent and everything else, this could potentially happen, as well as if once the bank actually initiates the process of drilling into the box, then there's that second notice that's a very lengthy notice, that, hey, if you don't notify us within 60 days, et cetera, then this could go to the treasurer.
Okay. And so currently we have statutes for, say, storage buildings space, which would be a notice to the person, and then through the newspaper. Banks are obviously held to a much higher standard. So we would make every effort to reach out to the person or the heirs.
Right.
Before this would happen. And then once it's transferred to the state would then also make an effort before liquidating those assets. And the state would keep an amount to offset the cost associated with that. The
Right.
bank would not. The bank has no upside or gain. Is that accurate?
Right. Well, the bank would theoretically, there is a process they would have, if, assuming there's enough proceeds left after the treasurer deducts costs and everything, the bank would be able to deduct or make a claim anyways for lawful charge. They include the unpaid rent or the drilling costs, which on average, the cost to drill a box, we've heard from our banks is
And that would be
200 to
paid
300.
to the treasurer's office.
Yeah, right, they would make a
Okay.
claim on it. That would be after the treasurer deducts costs.
Okay. Any questions by committee members?
I have a-
McMahon?
I have a friendly question. So I think the first time it's referenced in the bill is in 349 where it says first class United States mail. Would there be a reason or would it be cumbersome if you sent that registered United States mail instead of first class? That way there's proof that you did mail it.
I don't think so. I think we were essentially just following kind of the existing statutory process, but as far as first class to registered, I wouldn't assume so.
I'm extremely sympathetic to what the industry's holding, the banks are holding. I think it gives another layer of protection to the financial institutions if they send it registered mail, but I don't want to do anything to encumber it. So I'm just wondered, in your opinion, if you instead of making an amendment, maybe you talk with your
Right.
members
We
and
can
ask them
certainly
if they would
look
like
into
to do it registered mail, then we could just replace first class United States mail with registered United States mail everywhere in the bill on the floor if they were amendable to it.
Yeah, I can certainly, promise to follow up with you and check into that and I will say that one of the things that banks are already doing to try to help with this is going beyond what even just notices in terms of just, even offering incentives, anything like that, to, please send us your keys back at least, or come get your
Would you
contents.
like to make an amendment to that point or a reverse repeal or just to?
No. I don't want to reverse repeal unless that's what the chair, I defer to you, Chairman. I just think it's better to send it registered mail. If the chair is friendly to an amendment, I'd like to say everywhere in here where it says first class mail, that my amendment would be that we send it registered United States mail.
Hold there for just a second. Let me go through questions and then we'll come back to it. Senator Brumfield?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for sharing today. I'm concerned about the boxes. For an individual, just say they didn't know their parent or grandparent had a safety box or whatever. And with the fees and drilling, is there an allotted time for them to catch up, or is it pay now or lose it all?
Well, the contents of the box would not even be eligible for any possible achievement until at 3 years after it had become abandoned. And so you would have had that first notice at the beginning of that period. So there would have been a minimum those 3 years. And then even the second notice that hey, we're drilling into it. And if you don't respond now, there's a minimum, I believe, 60-day period before it would even be, before they could theoretically even hand it to the treasurer. And after discussing with the treasurer, we fully expect that process will actually be much longer just in terms of the treasurer's ability to actually take contents. We're looking at probably about a year process there,
Okay.
at least for the next several years until they make a lot of headway.
Senator Suber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What happens to like their personal documents that are in the safe deposit box, like wills, stock certificates, titles, anything like that?
So for contents like that, or as well as contents that don't have or recognizable commercial value, part of the bill allows the treasurer to promulgate rules to that effect to kind of go down. So the idea is to basically address each kind of one of those potential issues. And so specifically with wills, legal documents, titles, things like that, the idea is for the treasurer to maintain, which is essentially what our surrounding states do, is where the treasurer's office would maintain at least copies of that documentation, so that somebody's heir could say, hey, was there a copy of my dad's will or something like that in there? And so there would be access to at least a copy of that documentation.
Well, the thing about a will is you can always probate a will, so I'm curious, but another question. I mean, if you're waiting to find somebody after 3 years, I mean, it might be a lot harder than if you attempted to find somebody a lot sooner. I understand you probably couldn't, just because of creditors, I don't know that you could actually go in and reading your rules, you couldn't go in sooner than 3 years, but it's just 3 years. and I like the registered mail. I think that'd be appropriate, but it's 3 years after it's returned. Because a first-class mail, you might not ever get returned, but a registered would. But, I mean, do you think we ought to have some kind of procedure to maybe try to contact, family members within, a quicker time frame?
So if, for example, if they have any family members that are listed as as joint account owners or anything like that, they would already be getting any of those notices. I will say that one of the issues you would run into at that point would be privacy issues, because unless like you've probated a will and somebody is legally presumed to be the heir, the bank may not have legal authority to because, for example, the parent may not have wanted one child to know that they had a safe deposit box or something like that, unless they gave us specific directives and specific authorization to do something like that. There is an existing statute, though, in code that, for example, for heirs, can bring an affidavit, can sign and file an affidavit and present that to the bank, and the bank is able to rely on that affidavit of somebody saying, I am the legal heir to this person. Did my dad have a safe deposit box here? And if the bank is able to rely on an affidavit like that to give them access or anything like that.
Two things I would point out, and you're welcome to ask more questions, but one is some states, for instance, Alabama, as I understand it, have laws on their books where if a bank is headquartered in that state and has branches in other states that do not have laws like this, the contents of those boxes go to Alabama. So already Mississippi residents could be losing the contents of their box to the state of Alabama because we have no law on the books, which would be an issue for all of the things that may be in that box. Additionally, I think one of the current issues, while we should address the process, I think there's such a backlog of these that needs to be cleaned up. As we work through this, we may decide that we want to have two different processes, one for existing ones that have been on the books for a certain amount of time and one for going forward, and something to think about as we do that. But it seems as though we are already losing, based on some banks that are located in Mississippi, the contents of those boxes to another state.
That's right, Mr. Chairman. So for example, like when we were checking
Well,
with banks,
real quick,
Regions has none.
Do you have any more questions? Okay, and is there any other questions, Senator Sparks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You referenced the apparent owner. I'm assuming when someone takes a safety deposit box, you get a name. So that's the owner. There's no apparent owner.
That was meant more to address like for potential error issues where if you're having to rely on an affidavit that where they're claiming to be the rightful owner based on that affidavit, or as well as especially some of the older boxes. We've learned that there's a few situations where a safe deposit box may have been, for example, part of a larger business relationship where they didn't specifically rent that. It was more of a extra kind of concession or just add-on.
But you're using that term to define the last known address. The last known address would actually be the address that the person gave you when they rented the box or in some update from the actual owner. So we need to be careful about guessing who might be an heir and mailing it to them. I think you've got to mail it to the person who owns the box. The second thing is, does anywhere in this legislation talk about non-payment? Because I assume if somebody walks in and says, I'm going to rent a safety deposit box from the bank and that fee's $100 and they give you $1,000, whether they reply to any mailing or not from you, that box is paid forward. So does it actually reference boxes that have been non-payment for 3 years or just don't respond to some communication?
So for the presumption of abandonment, I believe that's in the new code section that creates 81560. Down there, it gets into to begin to be eligible for that presumption of abandonment. I believe it's the termination or expiration of the lease. Let's see here. Section. Maybe you're looking at the wrong version. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. That was the original. So, thank you. And so, if it says if the rental payment for a safe deposit box is delinquent for at least 1 year, or the lease agreement for the safe deposit box terminated not less than 1 year prior, then the lessor sends that first written notice there. Or
So
sorry,
that-
the second of that.
That's the definition of abandonment, is you hadn't been paid.
Right, and well, to start the abandonment period.
Okay. And then the last thing, I guess maybe just as a matter of interest, on line 103, you've got intangible personal property. You're expanding that definition to outstanding warrants and obligations of a government or governmental. What exactly
That,
are we talking about?
that was a proposed change from the treasurer's office dealing with outstanding fiscal warrants, and apparently supposedly, or according to them, there's an issue with sometimes these fiscal warrants never being actually, I guess, cashed or turned in, and they're just sitting out there for indeterminate amount periods of time, and so they wanted to kind of create some finality where either they're actually having to pay out, or they can be canceled and still subject, of course, to being reissued in the future.
But ultimately, the possession, following the logic of all of this, the possession of the contents potentially after 3 years when the bank is unpaid would shift to the state, as would the duty, obligation, and cost of maintaining any property's security.
Right, well, right, once the transfer of custody has been, accomplished, and so one of the agreements we're working on, plan on working with, or would be working on with the treasurer through the regulatory process, is to create essentially a timeline with a fairly lengthy runway, so that ideally the treasurer's office isn't actually having to store contents until they're essentially almost ready for the sale. The banks are storing until then before that transfer takes place, or we've also discussed, for example, the treasurer contracting with an auctioneer or somebody like that that is in the business of conducting those sales for them, who often have their own storage space as well. But ultimately, whatever costs the treasurer would have, that's why we did agree to have it, including making sure we had language in there that the treasurer could deduct those costs proportionally from the contents that they sell, the proceeds of the sale.
Along with whatever's owed to the bank,
Well, that would be, the treasurer would go.
first rights.
Go
Okay.
to-
Because the concern, going back to the wills, probating the original is one thing, trying to probate a copy gets you into a completely different level. So we do need to probably talk about wills and how they would be handled, the original document, that we may need to lean on the chancery clerk or somebody in the county, so that if somebody does discover it in the future, we've not foregone their rights to probate a will. Thank you.
Easily address that.
I think with the committee's indulgence, we'll get an amendment by Senator McMahon and continue this conversation.
To Senator Sparks's, Mr. Chairman, if I can speak to it, to Senator Sparks's point, I know of cases where this happens, and normally chancery judges have to work out, who had the latest copy of the will. So I've got some experience with that. I do appreciate the chair and this committee taking up this issue. There was a bill 7 years ago to address this, and the bill failed. And so this has been an ongoing problem. So my motion would be, I believe starting at 349 is the first line, but this was conceptual motion. Everywhere in the bill that would say first-class United States mail, that would be struck and would be registered United States mail. And then the chair has also asked me to include within the amendment a reverse repealer, and that's my motion.
You all have heard the motion. Any questions on the motion? On the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Any opposed? All right, now we're on the bill. Motion is title sufficient, do pass committee sub. And there are no further questions. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, we'll move that bill out. Next, we have Senate Bill 2732. Recognize Senator McCon to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for still being here after that lengthy debate. So this bill is aimed at fighting some of our cybersecurity fraud that we've got out there right now. You're seeing a big movement in the legislature right now trying to attack what's going on. One of the things I didn't realize is our number one and number two targets of identity fraud and identity theft is going to be our educational institutions and our healthcare institutions. And what you're going to find is that they're targeting our minors, getting their Social Security numbers. They're taking that and then they're starting credit accounts. And then that kid doesn't realize until they're older, actually applying for credit, that at that point, their credit has been shot. Let's just be honest. So we've got a substantial problem. Very few people realize, and I didn't realize this until I was at dinner the other night, that you can freeze your credit. At any time, you can freeze your credit. And one of the things they encourage you to do is to go and freeze the credit of your child so that at that point, that social security number cannot be utilized by any bad actor for going out there and taking advantage of your children. This bill is aimed at making that a little bit easier out there. What it says is that upon a child's birth, that a form will be given allowing for the request of that child's social security number and credit to be frozen. Unfortunately, we are currently, you don't exist unless you exist by 3 private companies in the United States of America. And those are your credit bureaus, and they're the ones who are at play right now. You can request at any time to freeze your credit through them for free. What we're doing is we're providing one more level out there where when that child's born and they receive their birth certificate, our agency, being the State Board of Health, becomes a consumer under the federal regulations to allow you then to request that credit to be frozen at that child's birth. So that social security number cannot go out there and be utilized by any bad actor to take advantage of your child. It gives 10 days notice with that form in which you can request that to be done. Once it's requested, the State Board of Health will go ahead and issue that request for a freezing of the social security number and the credit of that child. Once that's done, it can always be opened back up. Anytime you want to open your credit back up for any use, you have that right to. Parents can open it back up for the child's use as well. But this is just an immediate freeze of that child's credit so it doesn't get utilized by a bad actor. That would be the explanation of the bill, Mr. Chairman. I would entertain any questions.
Any questions by Senator Brumfield?
Thank you. Just yesterday at the gas pump, my card was jacked, hijacked by someone. Anyway, some fraudulent activity. So thank you for submitting this safety measure for our youth. But when it's time to reenact our credit, will there be a fee associated with it?
No
Free of
fee.
charge?
The credit bureaus can't charge you for those fees to freeze or unfreeze your credit.
Okay, thank
And I would encourage anybody in here that doesn't need your credit, most of us are broke and we may need our credit real soon. But if you'd like to, you can freeze your credit to stop some of these people from hitting your credit with requests and things of that nature.
And I can tell you, I have mine frozen. You can get online and unfreeze it for a short period of time if you need to at any time. Senator Suber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what's the 10-day restriction?
So it's not really a restriction. What it does, it gives from 10 days from the child's birth. This is for, you can request that it be, the credit be frozen at any time. This just says that within 10 days of the kid's birth, if you want to request that child's credit to be frozen, you've got 10 days to do it for the state to do it. After that, you're on your own to do it as a parent, which is your responsibility. We're just giving you that option in those first 10 days that the state will go ahead and do it for you.
Any other questions by committee members? Motion's title sufficient do pass. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, we're going to skip over Senate Bill 2769 and have a short meeting tomorrow to bring it up. The last bill we'll have today is Senate Bill 2830. Recognize Stephen Clay to present that bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephen Clay here from the Mississippi Society of CPAs. Senate Bill 2830 just gives an alternative pathway for them to sit for the CPA license. CPAs were dropping in numbers right and left, and 30 other states have passed this. So this would allow for a bachelor's level to get a bachelor's degree plus 2 years of experience. They don't change any of the other pathways, but they add that as a way to go sit for the CPA license. And, and then it adds that language to the mobility piece of the licensure law. So that way CPAs can go across other states that have also got this reciprocity for the mobility.
Any questions by committee members? Do you want to go through a couple of those details just to make sure that currently you have to have 150 hours, right?
Right. Well, yes, sir. So currently, you can have a bachelor's degree with an additional 30 hours of education and 1 year of relevant experience.
I think that's just current language.
Yeah, that is current. I'm just giving y'all the current ways of getting a license would be that. a master's degree, and 1 year of relevant experience. And this would just allow a bachelor's level with 2 years of experience, rather than getting spending extra money for more degree or more education.
But it will be the same CPA exam, which is
Correct.
quite extensive, and so you won't be shortchanging any of that. It'll just be how much formal college education credits you have to qualify to sit for the CPA.
Yes, sir.
exam. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Sparks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clay and if you said this, I really apologize for missing it and re-asking it, but is the State Board of Accountancy is supportive of the reduction?
Yes, sir.
And I know basically you used to have 5 years. You had to get a master's to meet that hours requirement. How much did you say that it's reduced?
Well, the current methods of sitting for the exam still would exist. This would just add a bachelor's level with 2 years of experience. No extra education, but 2 years of experience.
So in any field, just if you can master the exam, if you've had 2 years of experience in the field, which obviously wouldn't be a CPA because you don't have a license. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion? Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? All right, ayes have it. We'll pass that bill out. We'll have a meeting tomorrow. I'll work on the schedule and let you know what time. It'll be short. Motion to rise and report.
Rise and report.
All those in favor say aye.